Thank you to everyone for being here because it truly starts with you. You are our grassroots movements. You are the truth. I believe that people are the only hope for this country and especially for our Christian brethren in the Middle East who are extremely highly persecuted. What I've been doing since I was 15 years old, I've been trying to spread the truth as an Assyrian American of what's happening to our brothers and sisters in Iraq and Syria and really throughout the world, Christianity, and also warn Americans right here of what's very likely to happen right here in your backyards. So as an Assyrian, as an Assyrian Christian, I definitely, it wrenches my heart to see our brothers and sisters suffer things that you would just hear in scary movies every day. This is their life. And my father, since I was a child, was working with the U.S. government, and he also wanted to help Iraq. He knew that it was very, very unstable for Christians. Right away, we were marked as traitors because we're Christian and being native Assyrians. And we had 3 days to leave Iraq. So my parents, we didn't know as children that we were leaving. We thought we were coming to the United States on vacation. So my parents sold everything to immediate family, and we had a U.S. agent take us straight to the airport. They filed all of our paperwork on asylum, and we came to the United States, and he did not leave our side till we got on the plane, because what was happening to a lot of the Christians was that if they were found to be leaving permanently, they were grabbed right there at the airport and thrown in a room, and a lot of times we never heard from them. They got rid of them. And what my mom did, she took whatever cash we had and sewed it into our clothes because we couldn't show the Iraqi government that we were leaving permanently. So I, even as a child, was wondering why my mom was layering clothes on me, being in Iraq extremely hot. So we had clothes, or money sewn into our clothes, and that was, my mom carried me, and I was 6 years old, and I was running around everywhere, and she's like, you need to calm down. She was crying, and she went through every room in our house and cried as she said goodbye to our house, because this is the story of the Assyrian Christians in Iraq. And so when I came here to the United States, we became citizens and became very proud American Assyrians, and my mission was to spread the truth of what was happening. And so I started writing to a lot of media outlets as the other speakers were recommending, and it actually went pretty far. I wrote my first article, I contributed to the Wall Street Journal at 15 years of age of what was happening to the Christians. And it never really, nothing serious was done. I was watching the population of Christianity drastically decrease in Iraq, and this is long before ISIS. This has been going on for hundreds of years, especially in the last 100 years. That is the lowest drop in history for Christianity in Iraq. There was a time when we were about 30 million in Iraq. That's why it should scare everyone, because at a time, Iraq was all Christians, just like Lebanon, just like the majority of the countries. This is how they start. So, I kept trying to advocate, and as an activist, I started traveling, and then so many years passed by, nothing was really done. There were random churches that were detonated and attacked, and then, the most horrendous attack of our lifetime happened in 2014 when I received a phone call from my aunt, and she said, we don't know what's happening. There are these people that attacked our country, and they're going from city to city, and they're attacking all the Christians. It's never what these people in the government are saying, everyone's being attacked. There was never such thing. This was an attack against the Christians, and that is who the main prime target is in Iraq and Syria. It's the Christians. And she said, they're grabbing the women, they're kidnapping the children, they're taking them in bus loads and trucks, and they're loading them up like cattle, and we don't know what's happening. Where's the world? She's like, this is happening. How is this being allowed? They didn't even know if it was a war, if, they didn't even know the word ISIS, who they actually referred to as Daesh. Daesh is a more derogatory term to them. When we call them ISIS, they actually like that term. Daesh means the scum of the earth in the Middle East. So that's what the Middle Easterns and a lot of the, government officials in the United States refer to them as, and I would highly recommend for you to refer to them as Daesh. It's D-A-E-S-H. And so, we got together, a few of our churches, and we went to D.C. and we protested. And this was when it was nowhere on the media, and I was really confused. I said to myself, okay, this country is being invaded. All the Christians are being torn apart. Where is the U.S. government? We went into Iraq, we removed the government, Iraq's Saddam's regime, which was a dictatorship. Then we withdrew our troops. It's a complete destruction. It was a vacuum that really made it horrible for the Christians. And so, luckily I was able to connect with and made friends with a few journalists, and I blasted it for the first time on Fox News with Sean Hannity that there's a genocide happening in Iraq. So that was something that, I said very bluntly. Since then I have received many threats, because for someone that's from there speaking the truth to someone as, an American speaking it, they're considering me again as a traitor since we were children in Iraq. And that's only because we're spreading the truth. They don't want the genocide to get out. They didn't want it to leak out like it's happening. And so a lot of people say, who are the Assyrian Christians? Why is it so important to preserve them in Iraq? They are your equilibrium. They are the cushion. They are the people that really preserved humanity in Iraq. And the reason why things are getting so horrible in the Middle East is because Christianity is diminishing. And I truly believe it's so important for all Christian religions in the United States and throughout the world to really unite, to collaborate together, no matter what Christian identity, people refer to themselves, I'm Eastern Catholic Church of the East, but I work with all churches, all Christian religions, and that's definitely something that I see in our country here that is lacking. There's too much division.
Amen.
There's too much division, and that is a red light for self-destruction too. I can give you also some scenarios that happen. So when my aunt called and she said we were being invaded, horrible things were happening. Executions. By the way, my great-grandfathers were executed by the Kurdish Muslims when we were invaded in the genocide in the early 1900s. And they're burned alive, they're drowned. There are children as young as 4 years old, young Christian girls and Yazidis sold into sex slavery. There's a story of Sabiha that I will never forget, who I interviewed. She said that she was in her home, it's in a Christian city, all Christians, and they had so many churches in that city. It was one of the top 3 largest Christian areas in Iraq, and she said, they heard these men on the speakers. There were a few mosques there, and she said the ISIS invaded. They took over the mosque, went on the speakers, and they said, anyone who's Christian, you no longer own your home, you don't own your cars, and you must pay this jizya, which really doesn't exist because a few people that went there to pay the jizya, they laughed in their face, and some of them were killed right there on the spot if there was a confrontation. So, they went on these speakers, and the Christians immediately lost everything. And then as she's hearing these men on the speakers, they kicked her door down because the Christians were pretty well off in Iraq. They were one of the wealthiest people in Iraq because of their inheritance. They've been there for almost 7,000 years, long before Christianity existed. Almost 7,000 years. And so they kicked down her door. They looked at her. She was an older woman. They didn't find her appealing. They looked for if she had any daughters. That's another thing they do. They went through her whole house. She said, I don't have any daughters, it's just me and my husband. And they shot her water tank. They took all her gold, they took her cars, and they said, out, go have your Americans help you now. Because this is what we are labeled as the Christians in Iraq, because we have a history of collaborating with the British government who betrayed us, and we have a history of collaborating with the U.S. government who are right now betraying us. We have no allies in the Middle East. Nobody is protecting the Christians. You know, there's another story. Oh, by the way, her son was en route to come back home because he was visiting family in the northern portion of Iraq. And her son was caught in the road and shot dead. So she never saw her son again. And now she's divided with her whole family. They're spread out through the whole Middle East because no country is accepting them. And they're Christians. Keep in mind all the Muslims that they were mentioning that are being accepted before people like her. And there was another young gal. There was a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. They were being put on these buses. Keep in mind, these people had no idea what was happening. They went on these buses, they were being evacuated, and then an ISIS terrorist came on the bus and kind of scanned the bus and saw these young girls. And they were young, you know, Assyrian girls. Some of them had blonde hair, snatched them out of their mother's arms, and their mother never saw them again. And later on, we found out through intelligence that they were actually sold off into sex slavery, and the highest payment are for the youngest, as young as 4. And I actually had just recently, in December, lost my aunt to ISIS. Her area was attacked, and they were blowing up homes, Christian homes, and she was so scared. She was going to be in the United States in a couple more months before she was killed, and they blew up, you know, a few homes, and from the impact of the explosion, she dropped dead. They tried to save her in the hospital, but it's like going to a hospital in Iraq, they'll kill you even more. You know, it's definitely not as advanced as the hospitals here. So who's funding ISIS? That's the real question. I mean, really, ISIS started off in a very, very small number. And now they're bigger than anyone ever thought. As I remember, President Obama had said that they were just a JV team. When I tried to warn him, just as a civilian, of their capabilities, and it was funny that he made that speech right after that, it's nothing serious, they're just a JV team. Really? They're just a JV team? They took over half of Iraq and half of Syria in a matter of months. In a matter of weeks, really. So who's funding ISIS? One of the highest funding countries to ISIS is Saudi Arabia. That's who we should be focused on. You know, Iran, yes, they're an Islamic-dominated country, but there are over, I believe, in the hundreds. There's over 200 churches in Iran. There's not one church in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia's #1 enemy, genuinely, is the United States. If you step on Saudi Arabian land, they think that it's tainted. They have to bless, in their Islamic ways, the ground that you're walking on, because they think we're so filthy. Other countries, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, all these countries that are U.S. allies are funding ISIS directly. And some of the major funding is coming right here from the United States. That is very, very unfortunate. Especially when we know they're killing our own brothers and sisters from all this corruption that we see, you know, in Congress. I mean, it's really hard to find people like Dave Ejima. It's really hard to find congressmen like Steve King, people who speak the truth and that stand up for the truth and that fight for you. Realistically, these are the people that will fight for you if your brothers and sisters are being persecuted right here in our streets. That is very likely to happen. Some people think that having the same crisis that's happening in the Middle East will never happen in the United States. Well, guess what? I guarantee it will happen if things continue to be the way they are. The Assyrian Christians, we used to have one of the most powerful empires to ever exist, the longest in history, for thousands of years. The United States of America is a very new country. So So the naiveness that a lot of people have in our country is what will really tear us. This is a self-destruction. There will always be radicals. There's always been radicals in time. But I believe when you compare, I think a bigger threat is a naive American who doesn't believe in our Constitution, who is so politically correct, and they're so blind, and they have visors on. Some of the congressmen I speak to in Congress, I think they're more of a danger than a radical Muslim. Because a radical Muslim is a very visible threat. And we know how to take care of them. But when it's someone sitting right there in the chair, and they're making the decisions for you, and we're the ones that put them there, you know, that's what really, really makes me upset. And they raised a few points that I really found to be interesting and that I've known for a while, but is ISIS really in the United States? Of course they are. I mean, truly, when we have a Muslim president, how could they not be? Spoke about this before. It really blows me away that a lot of Americans don't know this, but throughout the world, even in European countries, throughout the Middle East, everyone knows that President Barack Hussein Obama is Muslim. They are amazed that many Americans don't know this. I could say that I'm Chinese. Am I really Chinese? Americans truly need to wake up. And another perception that a lot of people in the Middle East think of Americans is they're very naive, that they're able to talk you into anything because Americans in general are very good people. They have very good hearts. You know, like you said, we're the first people to accept, crisis to help crisis, and we're the first country out to help others. So this is, this perception is very, very real, and it's really happening. It's really true, like they're saying, that we are naive because everything that they say, we believe immediately, and that's how all these refugees are coming in, that yes, many ISIS terrorists are traveling with them. Do refugees exist? Of course they do. I basically, even though I came here asylum, I'm basically a refugee. Yes, there are some people that are highly persecuted that need refuge, but if they can't guarantee that there are no terrorists traveling with those refugees, then I would not accept any refugees. That if they don't guarantee that, it is a danger to your children's children's children. This is a problem you can't remove. In 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years, this is brewing to be a permanent problem. Have we failed as Americans to protect our country?
Yes.
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 And I really believe that, I wouldn't use the word radical, but we need to be extreme activists in our own ways. Like Dave was saying, we need to get in these decision makers' faces and say, what are you doing with our lives? This is our lives that will matter. Your children are not going to be the ones that are going to be serving in the U.S. military and going overseas and dying and shedding their blood in Iraq, and everything they did went for nothing. Their blood was shed in vain because of what our corrupted government officials have done to sell themselves out to radical countries that they're using on the front lines for all these deals that are happening, all these secret deals that are happening behind the scenes. My brother-in-law is a Navy SEAL, and every time that he went overseas, our heart was somewhere else. We couldn't, my sister couldn't sleep. She was pregnant many times. This is what military families go through. People have no idea, and no soldier's blood should ever be shed in vain. They're using these projects and they're making these decisions. They're not even thinking how serious they are and how long they're going to be affecting our country. The U.S. government, a lot of people say, are they really helping you? Are they really helping the Christians in Iraq? Absolutely not. I would say 20% of them. 20% of them in Congress and in Senate want to help us. I believe maybe a majority of them want to help us, but they're already sold out. They're not going to sell their agenda for a new agenda, when they've already positioned themselves and where they want to stand. But that's why it's important who we vote for, especially for our next president. The current updates in Iraq, or actually in the United States as well, is luckily, on a good note, we have had a recent genocide acknowledgement. I'm sure many of you have heard about it. The Christian and Yazidi genocide has been officially recognized in the United States. There are many countries that are following. It's very important. That was a very important decision for not only Christians in Iraq, but also as Americans, because now we should be holding them responsible. Now it goes into legal terms. Now they're obligated to protect the Christians and the minorities in these countries. So that was definitely important. It was extremely hard to do that. It took a lot of effort. It was like pulling teeth. It was pretty much like, we have our brothers and sisters. They're getting beheaded, crucified, and everything you can possibly think of. Young girls getting raped. And we're trying to explain it to the U.S. government. They're like, well, we're still not sure that it's a genocide. Really? Look at our population alone. So their main idea was, well, everyone's dying. Okay, that's where there's a difference. There's a religious war between Sunnis and Shias. This has been going on for hundreds of years. And then there's a genocide. The genocide removing all the minorities, especially indigenous people, who are the Assyrians and the Yazidis that have been there for thousands of years. So removing them, and because of their religion too, because they claim us as infidels, and occupying our lands with their political Islamic movements. So yes, that's a genocide. And our population going from 30 million at a time, and guess what our population is today? Under 300,000 in Iraq. That's less than 0.5%. 2003, when we were already afraid of the Christian population in Iraq, 2003 there was 1.3 million. That's under Saddam's regime. Or I'm sorry, not under Saddam's regime, but he had, it was during the time when there were still Islamic radicals. And it was 1.3 million. Now it's decreased that much. So the U.S. government, I'm not sure why it was so difficult for them to see. So I did a little bit of investigation to, I worked closely with their office to see what was the problem. You need the evidence? We have it. Whatever you need, I know, I'm connected with all the top Christian leadership in Iraq. I'll give it to you. What do you need? They said, well, this whole time we were basing our decision on a 30-page report from the Holocaust Memorial Museum stating that there was no Christian genocide. The Holocaust Memorial Museum had told the Secretary of State the Yazidis are suffering a genocide, but the Christians, just like Bernie Sanders had said, it's not exactly, that's not the word I would use. It's not really a genocide. So we had to correct that problem, and we sent an 800-page report to the U.S. government as far as video footages of executions, as far as all the geographic locations of where the Christians were persecuted, purged, slaughtered, raped, specific numbers and everything. Keep in mind, we'd already given them that, but it was coming from every organization and church throughout the world, but we compiled it together and said, there's the report. Finally, they acknowledged that it was a Christian genocide. And we have barely any churches left in Iraq. There are, over 120 churches were destroyed or converted to Islamic centers. And that's coming near you soon. And, that scares me as a Christian because that's what we escaped from in Iraq, and it's following us here. And on another note too, the British Museum, there were a few, I'm sure you heard about the sledgehammers, and they were using the trucks to destroy all the Assyrian Christian artifacts in Iraq. And the winged bulls symbolized really not only Assyrians, but the Christian heritage in that area. So when they destroyed the winged bulls in Iraq, it really shattered the hearts of many people throughout the world, especially when you appreciated history. So what the British Museum did was they rebuilt the two winged bulls that were thousands of years old. They actually rebuilt them, and they're protecting them in the UK. And they said as soon as Nineveh, the biblical and historical city of Nineveh, is liberated, that they're going to send the two winged bulls there to replace what they have destroyed. And another good note is the Assyrian Christians, we have, out of our own pockets, formed a military base. It's called the Nineveh Plains Protection Units. We don't like to call them the Christian military because we don't want to be labeled as the Crusaders, because then that will be another nightmare and we will truly be attacked more than we already are. So we, it's fully operating, and a lot of the trainers are U.S. veterans, Green Berets, Navy SEALs. It's really neat. It's a revolutionary change for us because we have been without power for so long and persecuted for so long that the Christians, just like it was mentioned earlier, Jesus taught us to love, but he did not teach us to go down on our knees and put our head down to get beheaded. So we have to stand up. We have to stand up for our rights. And if we need to carry a gun and a sword to defend our families, so we're training as many Assyrian Christians as possible, and we don't have a lot of population to work with, but we really urge the United States government and the American people to start working directly with the Christians in Iraq, because what's been happening is that, and I spoke to so many congressmen about this, is they're using so many middlemen that by the time something gets to the Christians, nothing is getting there. And they don't want anything to get to the Christians because that's ruining their mission. It's like they're trying to cut the water from one area, and then the water that's coming in, they're going to cut it too. They're going to, fulfill our tasks or our mission to revive Christianity in the Middle East when they truly want to destroy it. So, for example, one group of people that the Americans think are an ally in Iraq, I'm going to spill the truth on that to you, the Kurds. We have had a nightmare with them for over 100 years. The Christians, unlike the Holocaust that stopped, luckily, the Christian genocide has never stopped. The Christian genocide started technically in 1914. The Armenian genocide stopped. We're also Christians. Syrian genocide never ended. And the Kurds, accepting people in, like the refugee crisis that's happening, we're a pure example of what's going to happen here. Because we were one of the first people to do that. We accepted the Kurds. They claimed they were persecuted by the Turks, not knowing that they actually had a mission. We let them into northern Iraq, and they came in. First loads were 200,000, second load 400,000, and we really are heart-wrenched for them, and we accepted them. We tried to feed them, clothe them, just like Jesus Christ had taught us, and that's what we did. And then Turkey gave them the green light. Those were just sleeper cells. We had no idea they were sleeper cells. So they conducted one of the first genocides in history. They annihilated 750,000 Assyrians in one shot.
When?
In 1914. That was around the same time. They killed, the Turks also took a big part of that, where they annihilated 1.2 million Armenians, and also 500,000 Greeks. But the genocide for the Christians in Iraq never stopped. Then the Kurds were destroying our language, which that's the language that Jesus spoke. It's the Aramaic language. Some people refer to it as Assyrian, some people refer to it as Syriac, but that's the language that Jesus spoke. They hate when we speak it. When we wear the cross, when we wear a cross in the Middle East, it is, you're kidnapped, you're raped, you're harassed. you're not given a promotion, you're treated like second-class citizens. And so, they came in, and after the genocide, then, when the Middle East was wrongfully colonized by the UK, they had promised us, and actually my ancestors, my family members were part of that, where they were promised that they would reestablish the territories for Christians and protect them. So that is why they formed one of the strongest military units to exist in the Middle East. They were called the Assyrian Levies. If you get a chance, just Google Assyrian Levies. They were kind of like the Navy SEALs of the United States. They trained these tribal men to fight towards the Ottomans and to supposedly protect their lands, but we were outnumbered, so the British claimed that they were going to help us. They just walked out on us, and that's when we were slaughtered again. And then after that, the Christians were always claimed and labeled as traitors. But really, we never were traitors. All we were doing was fighting for our lands and to keep our language and to keep our faith. And that is our land. I mean, if you dig up Iraq, you will find all Assyrian and Babylonian artifacts. You'll find churches that are over 1,000 years old. They're so old, they're halfway underground. That is our land. It's not the lands of Arabs. It's not the lands of Kurds. They just settled there based on persecution and genocide behavior. So what the Kurds did in June of 2014, that they entirely blamed on the Iraqi military only. When ISIS was invading, keep in mind that there were only 400 of them. So less than 1,000 people invaded into Iraq. Remember, they were showing the videos of how they were going through the cities and shooting everyone, trying to scare everyone. So guess who allowed them in? The Kurds. They literally went, here are the Christian towns. They allowed ISIS in. We didn't know this 100% in the beginning, but based on intelligent information from the Middle East, the Kurds allowed ISIS into Iraq. Just like if you allow enough refugees into the United States, they will form their own organizations and terrorist movements that they won't be sleeping anymore. The sleeper cells will be immediately activated. So after they sold us out and they gave all the Christian towns to ISIS, and what happened with the Iraqi soldiers was a lot of their leaders and their commanders were actually Kurdish. So they went into helicopters and went to northern Iraq and completely left their posts. So the Iraqi soldiers had no idea what was happening. All these sirens are going off, and so they took off a lot of them were so young. They're only trained for 2 weeks to become soldiers. You think they're qualified enough to protect that country? So they took off their uniforms and ran, which a lot of those were actually captured and slaughtered by the Islamic State, by Daesh. And then, who comes out in the front to save the Christians? The Kurds. The Kurds come out, and, on the news, it was all over the news, the Kurdish Muslims are our friends, they're our allies, they're fighting on the front lines for the Christians, and every American in the United States was said, wow, we love those Kurds. They're really fighting against ISIS. But really, what they were doing is playing good cop, bad cop. And they're actually the people who allowed ISIS in, and this is where it all started. So if you truly want to know what the core and the foundation of this issue is, it's corruption. And guess what? They're our allies. The Kurdish Muslims are supposedly our allies. We have been trying so hard to convince the U.S. government that, if you want to really continue working with them, fine, but don't send our help, whether it's military, whether it's humanitarian. If you're going to send it to the Christians in Iraq, you need to send it direct. We don't need any middlemen. So another update is, right now they have formal menus in Iraq. The formal menus are all the ages of all the women in the sex slavery, and the highest paid sex slaves are the 4-year-olds, and it can go up as high as in their 30s. Anybody above that are considered damaged goods to Daesh, Islamic State. And it's really, really important, the grassroots movement, that you really need to spread the truth. You need to spread the truth no matter, even if you don't sound politically correct. You're fighting for justice, you're fighting for the truth. You're fighting for humanity, not just Christianity. There will be no more humanity. Because humanity, if you go to the Middle East and you actually go to the actual Christian towns like Nineveh, Mosul, it's horrible. It's like, excuse my language, open hell on earth. This is what it is. We are living the last years of life. And if we don't make a change, then it will be happening in our streets soon. And that is the most horrible thing to witness. I have interviewed so many genocide and actual ISIS crisis victims, and it's horrible. They're traumatized for the rest of their lives. What they are experiencing today, even the ones that are here on asylum, you can't even have a normal conversation with them because of what they have seen in Iraq, what's happened to the Christians. And I really truly believe that nobody is fighting for Christians, no other religion. The only people that really can help Christians are Christians. Everyone else, they will not genuinely help Christians. Christians are the first people to help everyone in this world. We are the first people on the front lines willing to kill ourselves to save other people. But who's really doing it for us? Nobody. No other religion is truly doing it. No other religion came into Iraq and tried to stop that genocide. And really, I'm very also disappointed in the Vatican. Another truth that you need to know. They did not do anything to stop the genocide from happening. You know, I'm very proud to be Christian, but the Pope, what the Pope did to not stand up firmly and say, you need to do something now. Why let this issue brew for so long, since 2014, and let Christianity scatter and be annihilated? You know, very, very disappointed in that. But I truly believe that, you know, there was a young girl that I was speaking to, and she had escaped ISIS, and she asked me, Nahren, why are they killing us? Why is God allowing them to kill us? And I said, help is on the way, and I don't believe that God is missing any of this. He sees everything. And I said that those people that you saw get killed around you, you know, your people, God loves a lot, and that's why He's taking them. And that was really hard to say to her, because I tried to explain to these people why no country in this world has helped them till this day. And it truly, truly, Christianity is at the verge of ending in the Middle East. And I don't want to see that happen in this country. So you all have to stand up, be strong, and no matter how people criticize you and say that you need to be politically correct, or, you know, we need to respect other religions, or we need to not discriminate. This is not discrimination. This is a holy war that's happening, and it will attack you in all different strategies. And, you know, I thank you so much for allowing me, you know, to share the truth with you, and God bless you all, and yes.
Tell me if I have my history right. I believe that, or at least I believe that I learned that when Saddam Hussein, before he was thrown out, that Iraq was about 60% Shia, 30% Sunni, 9% Christian, and Saddam Hussein actually kind of protected the Christians. And then when we left, that's when the Christians got in trouble.
Right. When Saddam was president, he didn't really have a faith, even though, you know, people claimed him as Muslim, but he was a dictator in a mind where he didn't accept any other ethnicities. But as long as you called yourself Iraqi, and he did not like the Shias at all.
He was supported by the Sunnis.
Exactly, he was Sunni, and actually his ancestors were Christians, but they forget, it's like they've evolved, just like what would happen in the United States. When you've evolved through a few generations to become Muslim, you forget that you were Christian once. So many of those people, if not all of them, were Christian. Maybe 3 generations or 4 generations back, but they really forgot. They forgot who they really were. But Saddam, he, even though his regime threatened my family, because we were nationalists and we stood up for Christians in a different way, but he did, there wasn't an active, full genocide primarily against Christians during his time. So it did happen right after he fell, where it started again, ignited at full force. Yes.
Last question, Mike.
Yeah, I've always heard Iraqis who are Christian are referred to as Chaldeans. What's the difference between Chaldean Christians and Syrian Christians?
Chaldeans are ethnically Assyrians, but they're Roman Catholic. And the rest of Assyrians are Church of the East, which is the old church, one of the first Christian religions. So when the Vatican in 1550s came to the Middle East and converted a portion of Assyrians, they renamed them the Chaldean Roman Catholics.
But they are Catholic.
They're Roman Catholic, but their ethnicity is Assyrian, technically.
You named a special fighting force, Nineveh something or other.
Yes.
Are we able to support them financially in any way?
Not yet. They're working on some sort of, just like you're able to support the Israeli Defense Force, we're working on some sort of legal website where anybody in the world can support this, revolutionary force. It's the NPU, which stands for Nineveh Plains Protection Units. They're comprised of primarily all Christians and some Yazidis. We haven't been financially supported by the U.S. government yet, even though they're nationally recognized in Iraq and they're an actual independent National Guard unit in Iraq. So
If we wanted to personally support them, is there a website or something we can go to and send a donation? Or?
as soon as they're finished with the website, I will post it on my social media and I'll give you out my cards too. But I will definitely blast it out on national news too as soon as that's finished, because that's very important. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the forces had dropped their weapons to not protect the Christians purposely. So it is important that we start protecting ourselves and directly. No more middlemen and no more this person will protect this person, because it's not happening. If we're going to have any international protection, we prefer it from Western countries.
Naren's going to be around. We're going to, because I promised you I'd get you out of here by 3, so we just got about 20 more minutes worth of stuff. So, Naren, you're going to hang around. Who wants to answer?
That's all right. Well, just a simple, quick question. I remember in 2003, right after we invaded Iraq, there was a very public presentation of a letter from the mayor of Tal Afar, singing the praises of, I think it was the 3rd Infantry Division, for rescuing that town. Tal Afar is in the middle of Nineveh, isn't it?
Tel Afar is on the outskirts of Nineveh.
The outskirts. Do you know what the status of the situation in that town is now? Because he was singing the praises of, I think actually it was the Marines, I forget, but he was singing the praises of the U.S. military for saving that town. And I often wondered, because we came in and then we left, what happened after that?
Right, Tel Afar, they've been in and out of it. A lot of those areas, it's like they're playing, cat and mouse, that phrase. So they go in, they liberate it, they leave, it's occupied again, and that's actually what's happening. A lot of the Christian towns are also being sold, and many people there don't understand who's selling it, but we know it's the government itself. They're selling towns, Christian towns primarily, and Yazidis, because they're constantly bullied. But that's what's happening there. Everything is up for grabs, pretty much, especially the Christian areas. That city by city is being sold. And by the way, the only solution for Iraq, I don't believe in a united Iraq anymore. That idea will never work. Iraq, the only way to save the innocent people that are being persecuted, no matter what religion they are in Iraq, is to divide it. So I believe that is on the table in the U.S. government, that they will divide Iraq, and it would be into Shiistan, Sunnistan, Kurdistan, and we hope for a province for Assyrian Christians and Yazidis, just like they've already been living together for thousands of years. So those are the two people they will plan on putting together. Before this, they wanted to do what the British government did to us, and that was throw in the Christians to wherever they went. And then that's the end of Christianity officially.
Thank you.
Thank you.